Okay, let's talk about China, because this is going to be a subject, as you might imagine, that is going to be on our minds for the 4 years of the Trump presidency. Apparently, they are already upset with us. They want Taiwan. Trump's challenging them. We have tariff talk. All this stuff is too confusing for me. We better bring in Stephen Yates to talk about it. National security expert with the wonderful Heritage Foundation. Always makes us a little bit smarter. Okay, Steve, why are the Chi-Coms mad at us already?
Well, because they are who they are is the short answer. But really, there is this really strange thing that I think no normal American would ever pay attention to, and that's a fact sheet on the State Department website where it had some text on there that was edited by someone we don't know that added a phrase that we don't support Taiwan independence. It's something that galaxy brains in the Beltway have bandied around for a long time. But then that was deleted and put in place instead that we oppose unilateral use of force or coercion. That coercion word is getting after all the pressure tactics that China has tried to put in place that look like a blockade or otherwise in recent times. And the Prime Minister of Japan and Prime Minister of India have supported this new language. So lo and behold, the State Department fact sheet changed that too. And the mandarins in Beijing's Puzzle Palace decided that was too far and they needed to warn us against fanning the flames of Taiwan independence.
Okay, first of all, let's talk about the coercion they're doing. It seems like every single morning you wake up and you see some Chinese naval vessel is brushed up against a fishing boat in Taiwan. What exactly are they doing over there?
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. And it's not just Taiwan. They've got their fishing vessels or Coast Guard-like vessels that are blasting massive hoses at innocent bystanders who are in their own sovereign waters in the Philippines, southern Japan. But yes, there's aircraft that have been buzzing close to Taiwan's airspace. They've launched missiles over in landing zones that are not far from Taiwan, and all these vessels keep approaching and encroaching. It's meant to just sort of have slow simmering terror effect on the people of Taiwan where they might beg for mercy and take a bad deal. So far, they haven't reached for that option. I don't think they will. But the pressure continues. It violates rules and norms that Beijing, of course, laughingly says that it wants to uphold in the international rules-based order.
Okay, so we've talked about this before, you and I, and it does get confusing because our policy seems to be intentionally confusing when it comes to Taiwan. When they stop doing, or I should say if, God forbid, they stop doing the I'm not touching you thing that like they're doing right now, what if they happen to start landing amphibious vehicles on the shore and we have a combined arms exercise where the Chinese divisions are storming into Taiwan? What are we going to do?
Well, according to policy as we've had it for decades, we should be arming them in a timely basis to have an adequate self-defense capability. Now, our supply chains have not been what they should be, and our timelines for manufacturing are way off, and the Beltway bandits have been pocketing billions, if not trillions of dollars to deliver things late. And so deterrence isn't what it should be on Taiwan's part, but our policy should be that we've sold them enough that they have the capability to deter that from happening, and then we would come in after the initial move to try to support. Now, the United States, Japan, and maybe others are on the blocks to decide, what do we do on a quicker time horizon to intervene or not? And so that, I think, is a very different place. Americans are not hungry for another undefined entanglement. I can completely understand that. And the Japanese have their own national interests, which the Prime Minister made clear. I thought that helped with the president, that it should not be the U.S. standing alone. But we have got to get our house in order when it comes to our defense supply chains, get them strategically decoupled from China, for heaven's sake, and make sure that we're delivering things on time that matter. And if we're not able to, help our allies do more. South Korea and Japan and India and others can do a lot more to fill this space, and that's better than it being a binary thing between the U.S. and China.
Steve, what are, quote, things that matter? I hate to nerd out on the details, but I geek out on things like this. How does an island like Taiwan, how can it possibly defend itself against a juggernaut like China, even to slow it down? What are we talking about? Missile defense? What is it?
Well, there's a lot of things that would fill in the blank, and there are better minds than mine that could probably do a better job of filling in that blank. But there's just some simple lessons learned from the Ukraine experience. Land war is different than taking an island that's 100 miles offshore. But it's also an important reminder that in many ways it's easier to defend and thwart what's coming at you than it is to attack, secure, and control another territory. So all those things that are capabilities, whether it's surface to air, drones, and other kinds of vessels that are undersea, surface, and air that can complicate things for China. But we shouldn't limit it to just the things that people consider to be defensive. I mean, if your life is being threatened, your livelihood's being threatened, targets on the mainland should be fair game. And Taiwan should be developing and is developing capabilities to strike the mainland in ways that would make it so that there's some pain to be felt if there's a kind of an attack. But the U.S. and allies should be doing more in the financial services side of things, too, to make it clear that should this balloon go up, that Chinese money will be seized anywhere in the international financial system, that China's banks will be immediately insolvent, and the whole host of measures that we have that really haven't been put onto the table by the white glove diplomat talks we've had for the last few decades.
Steve, House panel just released a report on Chinese espionage, documenting more than 60 ops, 20 states in this country. Now, spy lovers like me believe that's all James Bond stuff, but of course that's not the case. What kind of ops are these? What are they doing here?
Oh, this is tip of the iceberg stuff. Now, so Jesse, if you've got an unlimited population and you've got a massive program to indoctrinate and train and then deploy people to other countries and have them go in as students and researchers or working in an investment house or other seemingly innocuous things, then they can also engage in community organization, I think was Barack Obama's euphemism for how communists organize to influence American politics. You'd have groups that are in New York, LA, other major cities that look like they're just celebrating their Chineseness, but what they're really doing is tracking and harassing dissidents, soaking up any gaps in open source information, which is to say people who might have access to sensitive information, they go walk off their jobs, you make nice with them, they spill the beans over a beer or a meal or give them a promise of a nice trip somewhere. All of these kinds of compromising efforts have been going on for decades, but they've really picked up pace in recent years. Some of them have been exposed, like in New York, the person who was really close to Governor Hochul and was based out of New York City. We've had the driver for Dianne Feinstein that was there for 20 years, seemingly. But it's really amped up in recent years. And we've just been very bad as Americans. And the Chinese Communist Party is really good at saying, well, if you go after me being a bad communist spy, you're really just racist. And Americans go, ooh, I don't want to be called that. So maybe I just let this person compromise my institutions.
How much of this do you feel is American politicians possibly being in bed with the Chinese? It's hard not to think about a Chinese spy balloon that had American tech inside of it, starting in Alaska, the Biden administration finding out about it and allowing it to simply traverse the entire country, collect all that data before they shoot it down over the Atlantic. When I'm on the outside looking in at that, Steve, it looks to me like a president who's been compromised by the communist Chinese. It just does.
Yeah, well, there's a huge quotient of this that I put up there with ignorance and incompetence, but there is definitely a segment of this that is compromise. When you start throwing around millions of dollars in private accounts for family members, that is textbook compromise when you're working in intelligence and counterintelligence. And so you don't get these no-show jobs or massive balloons in family accounts with the expectation that you just want to send nice holiday letters and go to good receptions. It means when it matters, you're going to make something easily available to me. And we don't have hard evidence on where that went. And as it went into that stupid balloon situation that was a horrific humiliation that we allowed that to just float over and spend millions of dollars to shoot in the Atlantic. But that compromise is a very, very real part of this. That's what the New York stuff was with money close to politicians. There are several ethnic Chinese people. Again, we're not ethnically profiling, but the Communist Party sure does. And they go and they bring donations to get access. And access to do what? This is a real effect in our system. We've got to get better at recognizing it and building firewalls against it.
All right, finally, Steve, before I let you go, Russia, Ukraine, are we at the beginning of the end of all this? Trump administration appears to want to wrap this thing up. I have no earthly idea how long wrapping it up will take, but is this the beginning of the end?
I believe it is. There's a lot of momentum moving in that direction, although I would not want to underestimate how hard it is to stop these kinds of things. I mean, this has been 3 years of a grinding war of attrition, and it's going to take a lot to have a verified halt of hostilities, figure out what happens with land that was taken, and is there some kind of peacekeeping? What are the Europeans going to do for other Europeans? What other powers are going to do things so the United States is not everyone's first and most 911 call for a bailout? I mean, there's still a lot to work out. But what the Trump administration is doing is definitely not isolationism. There's like half the national security cabinet is out there in the world in pursuit of this peace.
Well, let's hope they get it done. Steve, thank you, brother. Appreciate it, as always. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.